Welcome back, students. In this video we're going to look at the kingdoms of England and Spain, and the English kings are going to be pretty closely tied to the French kings. John was a monarch who was unpopular. He was defeated by Philip Augustus at the Battle of Bouvines. He was also unpopular with his clergy and with his barons, who in 1215 forced him to sign the Magna Carta. That's one of the key terms for this week. It's significant because it illustrates that medieval kings could not rule without the support of at least one of these groups: the barons, or the nobles, and the clergy. And it reveals some of the limitations of a king's power. Why was John unpopular? He was unpopular because he had been calling for feudal service as money. So this was the way in which feudalism had developed. Typically, you receive land and you promise service. The king could say, well, I have the soldiers I need, but I need money to pay them, so I need you to pay your service in money. Fair enough. But what John is doing is calling for feudal service as money, but then not using it to go to war. He's basically just using it to make himself rich. And so this is what leads to the rebellion, John being forced to sign the Magna Carta, which shows the limits of royal power during this period. People tend to think that medieval kings and queens were just absolute rulers. It's totally not the case. It was the exercise of power in these kingdoms was a very complex exchange between these three most powerful groups: the king and his court, his powerful nobles, and his influential clergy. John was succeeded by his young son Henry. Henry has a long rule, but he also faces resistance to him from his barons, and his barons are even able to capture him and take him prisoner and force him to agree to the development of a new English institution, the institution of Parliament. This is an organization which will be comprised of 2 knights from each shire. Remember what a shire was? It was a division of England established by Alfred the Great. And there were also representatives from the towns, known as the commons. So you will have the lords and the commons. This is still the case today in England, that you have a House of Lords and a House of Commons that today make up the Parliament. Their roles have changed considerably, but these are the origins of them. And so any taxation beyond the revenues from the lands of the king had to be approved by this parliament. Remember, back to the time of William the Conqueror, the English king controls about 20% of the land. And this land produces revenue each year, but any money that he wants to raise from taxes after that has to be agreed to by this parliament. So it's another limit on the power of the medieval ruler. Now you can still raise a lot of money on 20% of all the land in England, but there's a limit to what you can do. You can't take over the whole kingdom. Henry III's successor, Edward I, was a much more effective king than either his father or his grandfather. He's able to unify England with Wales and Scotland through wars. He works with Parliament in order to raise the revenue to fund these wars, and this means that his nobles feel that they're working with him, in collaboration with him, and they support him. So the trend in England that we're seeing, kind of like the trend in France, is a trend towards centralization. Limits on the king, but in the end, a centralization of government power. Lastly, we're going to turn to medieval Spain. We're going to turn to medieval Spain and the rule of Ferdinand III, who was born in 1199. Ways in which Ferdinand III lived out similar aspects to his kingship as the other kings that we've looked at in detail so far, Louis IX of France and Frederick II, the Emperor. Like Frederick, Ferdinand came from a difficult background. His father, Alfonso IX, married his first cousin, Teresa of Portugal, and had 3 children with her. The marriage was declared annulled by the papacy, so the papacy declared that this marriage never took place. Alfonso then attacked his cousin, Alfonso VIII of Castile, using Muslim mercenaries after Alfonso VIII had been defeated and had been weakened at the Battle of Alarcos. So we have this rivalry between the kings of Leon and the kings of Castile, 2 Christian kingdoms who are fighting against each other. One of them is employing Muslim mercenaries against the other one that is just being defeated by a Muslim army. And so this is not a pretty situation, at least from the perspective of the Christians. And it shows you how complicated the situation was. And so for doing this, Alfonso IX is excommunicated. He then marries the daughter of Alfonso VIII, the king he had attacked, whose name was Berengaria, whose his first cousin once removed. This marriage was also condemned by the papacy. Alfonso VIII somehow was okay with the guy who just attacked him now marrying his daughter. But the couple stayed together, and their child was named Ferdinand. The couple stayed together until Ferdinand was 5. Alfonso IX, who seems to have been a pretty unpleasant piece of work, tried to disown his son. He told that his mother loved him, and when Alfonso VIII and her father's son died, she sent for her son, and he was acclaimed the King of Castile. When his father Alfonso IX died in 1229, Ferdinand is also declared King of Leon, and so he's able to unite these two Christian kingdoms into this very large orange Christian kingdom that you see on the map here. Like Frederick, Ferdinand was expected as a Christian king to lead crusades. Unlike Frederick, he did his crusading at home in Spain. He attempted to restore the ancient Christian kingdom of the Visigoths. In the end, he's perhaps the most successful crusader of them all. He was helped by the fact that before his death, Alfonso VIII had managed to unite the other Spanish Christian kingdoms, Navarre and Aragon, and to defeat the Almohads at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa in 1212. And this battle is very important. It marks one of the turning points in the efforts to restore Christian Spain. So Ferdinand has a great advantage. He becomes ruler of this very powerful kingdom right at the time when the Almohads have been weakened and are being defeated in North Africa, the time when the Taifas, Spanish Muslims, were also weakened. But Ferdinand nevertheless makes use of this. He captures the important cities, Cordoba, which remember had been the capital of Al-Andalus, Islamic-ruled Spain, and also the city of Seville, far to the south. There's the city of Seville here. And so when he dies in 1252, he is buried in Seville. The only part of Spain that is still under Islamic rule is this region of Granada at the very south here. The fact that Ferdinand is buried in Spain is a sign of the fact that the Christian Spaniards are now increasingly confident that they are on the offensive. Remember how important the relics of saints and those considered to be holy men and women were considered for Christians. They would have Ferdinand's body anywhere they thought there was a chance that it would be captured by the enemy. So the fact that Ferdinand is buried in Seville is a sign of the confidence in Christian Spaniards that they are actually going to complete the restoration of Christian Spain by his death. Ferdinand's tomb is inscribed in 4 languages: Arabic, Latin, Hebrew, and early Spanish. This is a sign of the continued cosmopolitan nature of Spain, that it remains a meeting point for these different civilizations that make up the Middle Ages: Islam and medieval Europe in this case. Ferdinand is like Frederick in that he promotes learning. He helps establish the first Spanish university. We didn't talk about universities in Spain last time, but it's during his reign that the first university in Spain is established. Unlike Frederick, however, he remains in the good graces of the papacy. He wins a great success in the Crusades, although at the same time he becomes king at a time when he's got some advantages. So these are the achievements of Ferdinand III, and I'm going to talk about medieval cathedrals, the last part of this lecture, in the next video.